Hybrid tea. The hybrid tea, the classic rose. When most people imagine a rose, this is what they see: a single, perfectly formed bloom rising above a long, thorny stem. It begins as a tight bud, slowly unfolding in a near-perfect spiral. Within days it reaches its peak, large, elegant, and impossible to ignore. This is why hybrid teas dominate the cut flower industry and rose competitions around the world. But perfection comes at a cost. Hybrid teas are among the most demanding roses to grow. Black spot, aphids, and mildew constantly threaten the plant. One week it looks flawless. The next, it's dropping leaves and demanding attention. Growing hybrid teas becomes an endless pursuit of that one perfect bloom, Floribunda. If the hybrid tea is a single masterpiece, the Floribunda is a fireworks display. Instead of producing one flower at a time, Floribundas create large clusters of blooms that open together. A single branch can carry dozens of flowers at once. At their peak, the foliage almost disappears beneath waves of color. They bloom longer, flower more frequently, and create a stronger visual impact than most other rose types. But maintaining that performance requires constant cleanup. As the blooms fade, hundreds of petals begin falling at the same time. Deadheading becomes a never-ending routine. Ignore it for too long, and the spectacular display quickly starts to look tired and neglected. Climbing roses completely change the way a garden feels. Unlike most roses, they aren't interested in staying small. They search for something to conquer: walls, fences, arches, pergolas. Long canes stretch upward year after year, slowly transforming hard structures into living architecture. At their peak, they can cover entire buildings with thousands of blooms, turning brick and stone into something almost dreamlike. But winter reveals the reality beneath the illusion. The flowers disappear, exposing a tangled network of thick, thorn-covered canes. Pruning them is difficult, time-consuming, and often painful. Climbing roses reward ambition, but they demand commitment. Grandifloras were developed by combining the large flowers of hybrid teas with the cluster flowering habit of Floribundas. The result is a rose that grows taller, blooms bigger, and commands more space than either parent. Mature plants can easily exceed 6 feet in height, producing large blooms in impressive clusters. At their best, grandifloras dominate the landscape, but their size creates new challenges. Heavy flowers and long stems make them vulnerable to wind and storms. A single summer downpour can bend or break branches under the weight of water-soaked blooms. Their beauty is impressive, but never effortless. Shrub roses are often marketed as the easy option, and honestly, they're not far from the truth. Modern varieties like knockout roses are incredibly resilient. They tolerate poor soil, resist many common diseases, and bloom repeatedly throughout the season with minimal attention. They provide color for months without demanding perfection from the gardener. But simplicity has its trade-offs. The flowers are usually less refined than hybrid teas, and many lack the rich fragrance found in older varieties. Shrub roses offer reliability instead of drama. They won't win many rose competitions, but they'll still be blooming when the others are struggling. Miniature roses look like someone shrunk a full-sized rose using a machine. Tiny leaves, tiny stems, and tiny flowers replicate every detail of their larger relatives. They're perfect for containers, balconies, and small gardens. At first, they seem easy, almost effortless. That's why so many people bring them indoors. Unfortunately, that's where the problems begin. Roses evolved to grow outside in moving air and direct sunlight. Indoors, poor airflow and low humidity can quickly attract spider mites and other pests. What begins as a charming houseplant often becomes a lesson in why roses prefer the outdoors. English roses, developed by David Austin, are often considered the luxury category of the rose world. They combine the fragrance and shape of old garden roses with the repeat flowering of modern varieties. Their blooms are enormous, densely packed with petals, and famous for their extraordinary scent. At their peak, they look almost unreal, like flowers from a painting. But beauty this intense comes with expectations. English roses require regular feeding, careful pruning, and consistent watering to perform at their best. Neglect them, and they lose much of the elegance that made them special in the first place. Ground cover roses. Ground cover roses serve a completely different purpose. Rather than growing upward, they spread outward, forming dense carpets of foliage and flowers. They're designed to suppress weeds, cover slopes, and fill difficult spaces with minimal maintenance. At their peak, they create a blanket of color that can stretch for yards. They seem harmless, almost invisible in their simplicity. But beneath the flowers lies a dense network of thorny stems. Reaching into an established ground cover rose can feel like sticking your hand into a living trap. They're low maintenance, but they're not always friendly. Polyantha. Polyanthas are among the great survivors of rose history. Introduced in the late 19th century, they helped shape many of the modern roses we know today. Their flowers are small, but they appear in enormous sprays that can cover an entire bush. They are remarkably hardy, tolerant of cold weather, and capable of blooming for long periods. At a distance, they resemble living bouquets. Yet despite their charm, most polyanthas offer very little fragrance. They deliver beauty through abundance rather than perfume. Their appeal is visual, not sensory. Species roses. Species roses are the originals, the wild ancestors from which thousands of modern varieties were created. Roses like Rosa canina have survived for centuries without human intervention. Their flowers are simple, usually with just 5 petals, and they bloom for only a short period each year. The display is brief, but it feels authentic. Bees, birds, and pollinators flock to them. When the flowers fade, they leave behind bright red hips that persist long after the blooms are gone. Species roses remind us of something important. Nature was never trying to create endless flowers. That was our idea. The other 30,000 rose varieties are simply our attempt to extend a moment that was never meant to last.